Welcome, everyone. My name is Noémie Plumier. I am the legal specialist at Human Right to Water. We are here today for the third webinar of the Aguazan Learning Journey on data for water-related disaster risk reduction. I would like to thank our partner organization, the Aguazan Community of Practice, EWAG, the Swiss Development and Cooperation SDC, and Squad Consulting for organizing this webinar series. Now, I would like to share with you some quick house rules. If you can give us the next slide, please, Samira. Thank you. Usual one, please keep your microphone off. We will give you a chance to exchange with our amazing speaker later on the breakout groups. This event has been recorded, so if you your camera will not be shown if you keep it off, and we focus the recording on the presentation and our speaker, right? Also, we will have a group picture in between part 1 and part 2 of our agenda today, and you're welcome to keep your camera off if you don't want to appear on the group picture. If you have any comment or question, Isabella and Samira are here to moderate the chat, and they will answer it, or again, you will have a chance during the breakout groups. Now we're going to propose you first poll and icebreaker. If Samira and Isabella, you could take over.
Yes, now you will see a poll in your screen, and you can just go ahead and answer it. We will be sharing it says what region are you from, and then we have different answers, and then if you go below, have you personally experienced a water-related disaster? So you can go ahead and answer it, and I'll leave it up for a little bit, and then we will be sharing the results at the end of the presentations. Okay, so now I am going to introduce our first speaker, which is Amanda Loofen. She is the CEO from Human Right to Water and a water governance expert. Her goal is to provide sustainable solutions based on human rights to improve access to water and sanitation through the encouragement of law and policy reform. So you can go ahead, Amanda.
Can you hear me okay? So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our e-learning journey with Aguazan, the Swiss Community of Practice, and Human Right to Water. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Amanda Loofen. I founded Human Right to Water 3 years ago to continue our mission to collect, share, use, and apply research with a vision to ensure that all people have access to safe and sustainable water and sanitation. So data for water-related disaster risk reduction. It has all the buzzwords in it: data, water, disaster, risk. Today, there are so many options for gathering, sharing, and using data, and there is so much of it, data that is, that the possibilities are endless. Today, we hope to share with you just some of the techniques that are already being employed by organizations that are able to lift their view from the quagmire of data inundation and see the bigger picture through the use of clever technology. And why is Human Right to Water involved in this topic, you may ask? The right to water is surely just a matter of giving people access to clean drinking water. However, the increasing frequency of storms, floods, droughts, and other water-related disasters affect all of our rights to fulfilling life, including food, security, health, energy production, and the need for biodiversity to sustain our environment. We're aiming for resilience, a commonly used word and one that can be interpreted in different ways. It can be thought of as the ability of a natural or a built system to recover from an extreme load or event. And adaptation, on the other hand, is an adjustment made in response to changes in function that impact the functionality of a natural or built system. Mitigation and adaptation to water extreme events can only be fully achieved if we have the foresight to understand where and when there could be events, how many people will be affected, and the scale of the impact. Digital tools provide a way to determine the best solutions, as they have the facility to manage huge amounts of data, to answer simple questions, and enable us to see the wood for the trees, so to speak. It's only recently that algorithms have been developed to cope with the volume of information needed to sort through the data and make it useful. The recent increase in digital tools enables us to see what can be predicted under different climate scenarios for a different river basin or area. The webinar today aims to share some of these digital forecasting tools to demonstrate how they can help and where we can access this information. We've handpicked a few technologies to share with you today to give a flavor of what can be achieved, who is doing it, and a chance to think about what else we could be doing and where. We'll talk about early warning systems to protect people from disasters. These can be used to track the path of cyclones, typhoons, and hurricanes at sea before they make landfall, or to assess the severity of droughts in comparison to historic droughts, to determine the presence of hotspots in active volcanoes, or monitor the progress of floods in very large basins. We'll also discuss the use of hydrological data to support decision-making. What is hydrological data? It includes information on water levels, water quality, data on glaciers, lakes, and soil moisture. All of this data combines to provide a picture for decision makers to plan for events, whether gradual or extreme. There are also different ways to collect the data, and we'll cover some exciting technologies on data visualization using satellite technology and innovative tools for turning data into decision-making instruments. We'll also discuss the modeling of climate risks to plan for resilience in different contexts. So we've reserved the last half an hour in breakout rooms to give you a chance to ask direct questions of the speakers, to share your experiences, and to think about other opportunities to use the information shared today. I'm now pleased to pass the floor to Isabella Cubello, the Communications Officer at Human Right to Water, who will introduce you to our speakers today. Thanks, Isa.
Thank you, Amanda. So now we're going to hear from Angelica Gutierrez. Dr. Gutierrez is a senior scientist in the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the NOAA, and she co-leads for the Intergovernmental Group of Earth Observations Global Water Sustainability Initiative, GeoGLOS. Go ahead, Angelica.
Yes, good morning and pleasure to be here. Thank you for this invitation. Today, I'm going to share briefly the experience and a collaboration not only from the GeoGLOS and the Group on Earth Observations, but also a new task team and the new activities with the WMO. Next. So the Early Warnings for All initiative was actually formally launched by the UN Secretary General in November of 2022 at COP27. The executive plan summarizes the actions that are required to achieve the goal of ensuring every person in the world is going to be protected by an early warning systems by 2027. Next. This plan highlights not only the infrastructure, but also the governance, and it has a people-centered approach that requires to effectively disseminate and communicate the warnings. And so under the action plan, different organizations will lead the implementation of the 4 elements or pillars that make up the early warning plan chain. So in the pillar 1, on the figure on the left, we have disaster and risk knowledge that is led by UNDRR. Pillar 2 is detection, observation, monitoring, analysis, and forecasting of hazards, and that is led by the WMO. And today I will focus on that pillar. On pillar 3, we have the warning and dissemination and communication, and that is led by the International Telecommunication Union, ITU. And the 4th one is preparedness to respond, and that is led by the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. So I will focus on pillar 2. Next. So within this element of the the action plan. The pillar 2 focuses on detection, observations, monitoring, analysis. And so within this element, recently it was created a task team, was created by the WMO, a task team that is focusing on the implementation of products from non-traditional sources in the Integrated Processing and Prediction System, or WIPS. The WIPS is actually a worldwide network of operational centers operated by WMO members. And so this task team is a group of volunteers. Next. So our responsibility as a task team is, at the moment, we are working on developing an assessment and a catalog of what are the relevant producers and products of global riverine flood forecasting. And as you see on the table on the right, we have a list of some of the current publicly available operational global riverine flood forecasting systems. This report is going to be presented to the Earth System Modeling and Prediction Standing Committee under the Infrastructure Commission. So the group on Earth observations, as you see from the list, is part of this task team, and we are exploring possible contributions of GeoGLOS, the Global Water Sustainability Initiative, in the context of early warning for all. Next. So GeoGLOS, let's talk about GeoGLOS. It was created to solve multi and transdisciplinary, so not only thematic, but also across boundaries, political boundaries, challenges associated with achieving global water sustainability, while we are promoting activities that provide equitable solutions. And so the most important element of GeoGLOS has been the application of Earth observations to create a system that forecasts flow on every river in the world, while also providing retrospective analysis 40 years from now. We are very soon increasing that to 80 years. The spatial coverage is global, except in the regions in the extreme north that are mostly frozen, and also in very small islands. The spatial resolution, so we have about 1 million stream segments, and that provides an average watershed size of 150 square kilometers. We are planning this year to increase from 1 million to 5 million stream segments, so that size, watershed size, can also be decreased. The output of the service is a stream flow discharge. Next. So one of the most important characteristics of GeoGLOS is that is the local adaptation of the global forecast using in situ data and other localized data. When I say other localized, we are also using satellite information, water elevation. So it's in situ and satellite data. So we use the observed local stream flow from different meteorological services. Often this bias is a benefit because the corrections result from main influence that are corrected as well. So if you would go back once, no, just that's right. So in this one, here are some of the most important elements and contributions of GeoGLOS. And I want to invite you to visit the stories.geoglos.org, where you can find more detailed information. In the next one, because I think that is my time. So we are more than 30 organizations contributing to the development and sustainability of the service. Worldwide, there are implementations in Africa, Asia, the Americas, and so I'll be more than happy to respond to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelica. Yes, you really respected your time. We can go on, Isabella, with the next speaker.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So the next speaker is Igor Chernov. He is an environmental science professional at WMO. He is the HydroHub project officer. Since October 2022, Igor has been a member of the Technical Advisory Committee of the World Water Quality Alliance. So thank you, Igor.
Thank you very much. Good day, everyone, and thank you again for inviting me to be part of this e-workshop. And it's my pleasure to present you and share with you my presentation on hydrometeorological data and how it supports water-related decision-making. Next slide, please. I would like to start my presentation with recalling the interconnected nature of freshwater systems and why it's so important to have access to the data from different countries, but also from different stakeholders. As you see on this map, there are 286 transboundary basins in the world that span through the 151 countries and the home to 2.8 billion people. Next slide, please. So what is the critical water-related activities that rely on the hydrological data? This includes the planning, designing, operating and maintaining water management systems. It's protecting water quality and regulating pollutant discharges. It's about managing water rights and transboundary water issues, preparing and distributing flood forecasts and warnings, monitoring and managing environmental and ecological flows, designing infrastructure, for example, such bridges, supporting navigation and commerce, and also for education and research. Next, please. On this slide, you see that there are many different data users, such as forecasting agencies, public sector entities, international organizations, research institutes, general public, etc. And all of these different users needs hydrological data, but also other kinds of data, such as meteorological data, land use data, environmental data, climatological data, and many other kinds of data. And the uses includes forecasting, research, analysis, consultation, monitoring, and planning. Next slide, please. So the data use, as you see here on the data value chain, is only the third big step in the data value chain that is called here data uptake. But there is two big steps before actually the data used, and it's a responsibility of the data producers and providers. So it's about the data collection and data publication. And each of these stages involves different sub-stages for sure. For example, in the data collection, there is a very important step ensuring that the data of appropriate quality and the fit for the purpose and for the use in different applications. And the second step, data, previous slide.
Sorry, you can just continue. I need to redo it.
Okay, and in this presentation, I will be mostly focusing on the data publication and data access aspect of the data value chain. So on this slide, you will see that yes, you can go to the next. It's okay. So on this slide, you can see that the hydrological data is most wanted, but often not available. And this is because not all countries yet collecting different types of hydrological data. And in many cases, even if they collect, the collection is in declining state. So on the left, you can see that we carried out recently a survey of national hydrological and meteorological services, and we found out that, for example, out of 79 countries, 8 countries doesn't collect at all the water level data. For example, 50 countries doesn't collect groundwater quality data, and 55 doesn't collect soil moisture. So the status of the collection is unfortunately not it's still very challenging. And on the right side, you see that from the World Bank report, they found out that around the 66% of the hydrometeorological observation networks in developing countries are in poor or declining state. So this represents the challenges of the first step of the data value and about the data collection. Next slide, please. But even if the data is available, so it's very often remains dispersed and difficult to discover, access, and reuse this data. And to address this issue of accessibility and interoperability of data, the FAIR data principles were established. Next, please. So what are FAIR principles of the data? It's about findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So findable data is the data and associated with it metadata should be easily to find online by both people, but also the computers, machines. The accessibility is about the data and metadata being retrievable online using the standardized communication protocols. Interoperable data should be easily combined and used with other data and tools, as I mentioned before, combining different types of data together and using in different tools and applications for different purposes. Reusable data should be well described, so have good description, have good metadata, so that they can be replicated and used in different settings. Next slide, please. So how WMO helps countries and institutions in addressing this and to advancing the interoperability and accessibility of their hydrological data. It's so WMO established the WMO hydrological observing system that's called HUS, which uses two approaches. It's standardized approach and brokering approach that is compatible and complementary to each other. So standardization approach looking mostly at the developing and fostering the development application of the standards for the data representation, data description, and the data accessibility. And the brokering approach looking at establishing a system that harmonizes the data that coming from different sources in very different formats and heterogeneous sources, and making them available in more standardized and more harmonized way that it can be used by many and diverse users. Next slide, please. So just an example of such system, for example, implemented in the Arctic region. So as you see on the left, there are 7 countries that share the essential data from essential stations through the HUS system. And for your information, all this data that came into the HUS system with very different formats, with metadata described in different languages in different ways, and with different access details. And HUS harmonizes all this data and now makes it available to the different users and with different web services and different in the harmonized way. So the users, as you can see on the right, can use all of this data together in the different tools such as JWIS, HydroDesktop, Helgoland, R, Jupyter, but also many other digital tools. Next slide, please.
1 minute left.
Thank you. And here you can see that HUS has its global portal, so you can go it online. There is a link provided here, and you can see what are the stations from which countries are available in the HUS system. You can download data, visualize this data, but you can also access, if you're using specific tool to model or to analyze the data, you can use the accessible web services to do so. Next slide, please. And just to finish my presentation on that, we are now in the pursuing the Earth system approach at WMO, and the HUS system is only part of the bigger system called WIS 2.0, that is a framework enabling interoperability of different kinds of data, including climate, cryosphere, ocean, and weather. Next slide, please. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions and responding to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Igor. Sorry, I sent the link incorrectly there. So now we're gonna hear from David Dodd and David Baxter. So David Dodd is the CEO for the International Sustainable Resilience Center located in New Orleans, USA. He is senior expert in sustainability, disaster recovery, and resilience using public-private partnerships. And then David Baxter, he is the senior PPP advisor at ISRC, In addition, he is a steering committee member of the World Association of PPP Units and Professions, WAP, based in Geneva. He has 30 plus years of international development consulting experience. So please go ahead. Thank you.
You are muted,
You're
David.
muted.
Apologies. It's a great pleasure to be here. A little bit about ISRC. We were founded 6 years ago, and we're dedicated to increasing resilience capacity around the world. And one of our primary tools to do that is public-private partnerships. Next slide, please. Coming from New Orleans, which many of you know was completely flooded in 2005 by Hurricane Katrina. We know flooding, we also know drought, and they're occurring now at the same time. California and Louisiana both experienced flooding and drought simultaneously, and other places around the world like Greece, which had wildfires and flooding at one point simultaneously. To address these issues, there are a lot of great things happening around the world, but one that we're familiar with here in the United States is the 10 Across Initiative, and that goes along the Interstate Highway 10 from Florida to California, from one coast to the other coast. Some have too much water, some don't have enough water, but I would encourage you to visit and look at some of the innovative things they're doing with water management. The challenge we face in developing public-private partnerships and in developing investment in a resilience is produce scientifically based measurement of impacts and then comparing impacts without then with resilience investment. This is allowed through a process called agent-based modeling, and agents are different factors that can be entered into a modeling formula that will produce different results under different scenarios. We are dedicated to producing, using data to produce bona fide, scientifically based, defensible return on investment for both public and private investors in resilience. Next slide, please. Agent-based modeling really is a structure that allows different factors to be entered, so you can create an infinite number of what-if scenarios for better decisions in reducing disaster risk. Flooding is a major issue. We know that. We have it all over the world now, and so what we want to do when it comes to water is really do a better job of managing water through investments in resilience. So the model uses historical data and then forecasts of future risk basis on credible sources, since the COP is, many of you know, and then UNDRR, which has been a colleague of ours for many years. We also incorporate socioeconomic. This is very important because we understand that there are societal costs, not just costs to the built environment, but there are costs that are often hidden that occur when you have massive flooding. I can tell you from personal experience in New Orleans that the societal and social tearing of that fabric was as costly as any of the physical damage. Next slide, please. Here's an example of modeling floods in Calgary, which is in southern Western Canada. They had massive floods in 2013. We were able to model those floods with a 98% accuracy of the impacts of those floods. And again, utilizing data, we relied so much on data and you know, the WMO and others that provide that are invaluable to us because what we are doing is taking that data and then utilizing it to show how investments in flood protection, investments in drought protection can actually provide a return in terms of reduced damages. Next slide, please. Again, the financial and social impact analysis comes after the physical impact analysis. But what we do is basically utilize an economic impact model and a social and societal impact model to calculate, based on reduction in damages and in different scenarios, what a return would look like on that investment in resilience. Next slide. Insurance is a really significant issue in water management. Insured losses from disaster were $120 billion in 2022. They're forecast to be that or more. So again, the cost of insurance is one thing, being able to obtain insurance is another. And in states in the US like Louisiana and Florida, places like India, Japan, insurance is becoming increasingly expensive, prohibitively expensive in many cases, if they're able to get insurance, because in many cases insurance companies have just pulled away because of their losses. Next slide. I'll turn this over to David Baxter because he has so much experience in public-private partnerships to go over a couple of successful examples, and then add, David, your expertise in this arena as far as using public-private partnerships for successful water management.
Thank you, David, and thank you for inviting me. So there are numerous efforts that are underway globally, which are, thinking out of the box and finding ways to build redundancy or to improve defenses against flooding. Two examples are here, which I'll just very briefly mention, is, the Broadland flooding alleviation effort in the UK. And in the sense of, it was rebuilding and maintaining flood defenses, but also using natural defenses and flood zones, etc. In the old way of flood defense or mitigation usually involved building massive concrete walls, and building infrastructure that often was overwhelmed, cost hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, and also resulted in situations where you just passed the problem down to the next community below you, because you might protect your community, but then you were flushing water to them. So this process that's taken place in the UK is also very common in the Netherlands, where in the Netherlands are actually even in some places pulling down dikes and creating floodlands that act as natural sponges for massive flooding. And then the water can drain away slowly after flood, and the soft sort of infrastructure is also, creating healthy environmental systems. The Malaysia Smart Stormwater Management and Road Tunnel is a fascinating example as well. And this was building a piece of infrastructure that could serve one purpose, but then when something went wrong, it could also serve another purpose. And this, if you look at it, was a road tunnel, which also was a massive drainage tunnel. And so when flooding occurred, what would happen is the road to cars would be closed. It then could be, as you can see in the diagram up top, various levels of capacity to absorb water and flush it away. And then when the water subsided again, it would revert back to its normal structure. And this is just kind of one of the things, especially in PPP projects, where all the models we've talked about with previous speakers as well, and tools can help predict mitigations, etc., and also can help create examples, or how would you call it, scenarios of what could happen. But with PPPs, one of the biggest aspects is risk mitigation. And then once you've got an idea of the risk and how you can mitigate it, you can allocate responsibility to an appropriate party. And as David mentioned, I just wanted to finish with one comment that with insurance, just yesterday, State Farm, which is one of the biggest insurance companies in the United States, announced that it's completely withdrawing from Florida, which is going to result in 100,000 insurance policies being null and void. And you can just think of the consequences of that. So I'll hand over back to David.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate, next slide, please. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here. If you want to know more, we're going to be in breakout group 2 later on. Happy to discuss, answer any questions. I know we went through this very quickly, but hopefully some of that was able to be absorbed, and we again are very happy to be here and look forward to the breakout group. Thank you.
Thank you so much for to the both of you. So now, lastly, we're going to hear from Rahul Sengupta. He is a program management officer in the UN Office of Disaster Risk Reduction. He worked previously at the Crisis and Prevention Recovery Bureau of UNDP. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to confirm that you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see it.
Thank you. Firstly, I wanted to start off by thanking HR2 Water and our partners for Swiss government to invite us, the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, to this webinar. We're really excited to share some of our experiences and just kind of add voice to some of the excellent presentations that we saw today. So being the last speaker, it's always very difficult to, meet up to the standards that have been set, but I'll try my best. So I will focus on the Sendai framework, and just to give you a very short background on the framework. So we talk, of course, the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction talks all about disaster risk, and we are the custodian agency for the Sendai framework, which, as you know, is a framework which was established in 2015 along with the SDG, the International Agreement on Sustainable Development and Paris Agreement. It runs till 2030. It has one goal about hazard exposure and decreasing that and increasing preparedness and resilience. It has 4 priorities of action, primarily on understanding risk, strengthening risk governance, investing on for resilience, and enhancing preparedness and recovery. So these are the 4 priorities, we could say, pillars on which the Sendai framework is built on. And we have 7 targets, primarily looking at areas of mortality, affected people, economic losses, and damage to infrastructure and services, which are what all the governments in the world try to bring this down, the member states working together. And then there are 3 targets, which are essentially to build on policy making, on building national and local strategies, on international cooperation, and the 3rd one on improving the early warning systems and risk information. So basically, why we are what we are bringing to the table is a global picture showing what the governments or the member states has reported, and this is we wanted to make it very clear that this is about member states. This is about the UN member states coming together and taking on the accountability of reporting how they're performing or how they are tackling the issues of disaster losses. So moving, I want to focus a bit on the midterm review of the Sendai framework. The reason being, we are at a very opportune moment. We just, in May 2023, we had the high-level meeting of the UN General Assembly. It's the first time it was at the General Assembly. This particular issue was, taken as a political declaration was made, and this review government came up with 2 broad or main kind of outputs, if we can say. One is the report of the midterm review itself, and secondly, as you can see on the screen, the political declaration, which is the essential document that comes out from the member states. So what do these documents primarily focused on? So main recommendations are, and I've listed down, and because we can share the presentation, we can send, I've listed down all the bullets of the points that were made, the recommendations that were made, but or the key recommendations. But I have focused on or highlighted, and I'll only go through those which were related to data because of our current topic of conversation here. So to focus on the main recommendation, one is there's a call for breaking down silos. Nothing new, but it is very important that we have an opportunity to break down and facilitate the silos and facilitate the detailed and open data sets. Second is to strengthen data ecosystems going across sectors and looking at data generation management and analytics. The third one is about collaboration between the statistical and the DRR organization. This is very important. There's no dearth of data, as a colleague mentioned earlier earlier in the hour, that there is no dearth of data. Data has always been there on disaster losses and damages, but it's the statistical. It is important to look at it from a statistical point of view and just not from a life-saving and search and rescue issues, which primarily the data has been covering over the years. So this to bring them the statistical perspective, that is very important, and that is something the UN Statistical Commission, which means all the statistical bodies within the UN and the statistical parts of the governments are working together now under this UN Statistical Commission, under the aegis of the disaster risk statistics. Moving on, some of the challenges that we find in the Sendai Framework outcome and goal. That risk continues to be externalized in investments and finance. So there is a lack of interoperability between the data, that is risk-related data, and financial data. Then, of course, a very old issue that which needs to be addressed all the time is about capacity, the capacity to access and interpret the risk and data and risk knowledge, something that our WMO colleague also alluded to earlier in his presentation. Moving on, the political declaration, and this is they were primarily focused or is let's say it showed in along the four priorities of the Sendai framework. So under priority 1 on understanding disaster risk, there is a call for strengthening and providing capacity, finance, and technology for data collection and systemic risk assessments. Then another point on data is to enhance the quality of and access to multi-hazard risk data. That's very key. As we can see with COVID, there's a requirement of focusing on multiple types of hazards, and the Sendai framework has actually looked into this plethora of hazards, which now has been documented by the International Science Council and the UNDRR, and there is a hazard classification of 302 hazards that have been classified now, on which work is ongoing. Then another very important area is of disaggregate data. So even if there has been data collection of the countries are reporting, there are a number of areas of disaggregated data like sex disaggregation, age, income, disability-related disaggregation. They are all still in the domain of being optional, but countries are taking a lot of interest in that. And I can report to you that 66 of the governments of the countries have already started reporting on disaggregated data. Looking on priority 2, again, moving quickly, there is a need for improving national mechanisms on risk data and analysis. There's an importance of the accessibility and interoperability of risk information. And third one, it's not so much about the data itself, but to show how DRR implementation mainstream has been called out in different areas, including water, which is also an important area for today's conversation. Then again, on number 5, there is very important link required across levels, the sub-regional, regional, and global and cross-boundary, cooperation for the requirement for transboundary risks, which are not, contained within national borders. Priority 3 on investing on DRR for resilience. There is a need for strengthening investments on capacity development, data and technology, and the implementation and means of information collection analysis needs to be improved. Last priority, 2 important areas on data was to strengthen risk monitoring and impact-based forecasting with early warning communications, and the enhancement of the development of dissemination of science-based targeted methodologies and tools with cooperation among the states.
You have 1 minute left.
Yeah, I'm going to end the slide with 2 slides. One focusing on water-related disasters, and the other on the local level. This was asked in the agenda. Just to a caveat here, this water-related disasters is as available from the monitoring of the Sendai framework as provided by the countries which is, again, as I said, hazard-related disaggregation is also a disaggregation which is optional. So it is to the extent that optional, the data has been provided by the countries. So what we see is in the last 10 years, water disasters have almost doubled. In terms of affected people, 93% of the people affected were from water disasters, and 94% of infrastructure losses and damages. And my last slide on disaster risk reduction, the local governance, we have 102 countries reporting on local governments with local disaster risk reduction strategies. And in these 102 countries, you can say on an average, 72% of the local governments actually have shown having the local disaster risk reduction strategies. So this is all related to the Sendai framework and the specific targets of the Sendai framework, which were related to the agenda topic that we had here. So I just wanted to cover that and give you a snapshot. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rahul, and thank you to all our previous speakers. Now we would like to show Samira, would you mind to for the share? No, Rahul, sorry, could you stop sharing? Because we're going to have to share our own slides. And I will hand over. I will hand over to Isa. Oh, sorry.
I have stopped sharing.
I'm not sharing anymore.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'll pass over first to Isabella to present the results of the first poll. Then we will take a group picture before going to breakout groups, and then we'll also propose you a second poll. Isa, please, over to you.
All right, so I'm going to share the results. I hope you can see them on the screen. So as for what region we are covering today, we have 31% from Africa, 31% from Europe, 23% from Asia, and 14% from the Americas. We have no representatives from Oceania. And as for have you personally experienced a water-related disaster, 66% answered yes, and then 34% answered no. Okay. Should I share the second poll? Yeah. Perfect. So now we're going to have a second poll in which we are asking, from which presentation have you learned the most? And if you go further down, as if you don't remember, early warning systems from Geoflows was Angelica. The meteorological data was Igor. Then climate risks, resilience and modeling was the Davids. And then disaster resilience and data was Rahul. And then if you go further down, would you be interested in attending an in-person follow-up workshop? And I can let Samira will talk later on about this.
Thank you. While you are continuing answering the second poll, I would also like to highly encourage you to stay with us on the breakout groups, because most of our speakers, again, are going to stay with us, and they'll be giving you more in-depth details about their presentation, asking questions. And so, yeah, take this opportunity. Thank you again for them for accepting to stay with us. And now we're going to take a group picture. So if you would like to turn on your cameras and give us your most beautiful smile. And after that, we will go in the breakout groups. Thank you. Samira, I'll hand over to you to give us a warning, maybe.
I think Amanda will explain the breakout groups quickly. So I'll hand over to Amanda after we do the group picture. Who is doing the group picture? Isabella, are you taking the screenshot? Okay, so maybe you give us the warning.
Okay, so just 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm gonna check the second page, and just everyone stay. 1, 2, and 3. Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
Isa.
You're
and now
muted,
we'll hand over
Amanda.
to Amanda to give us some details about the breakout groups.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, to our presenters, because very different perspectives from the 4 presentations. And I think as a general comment on it all. It gave us a real feeling of the importance of having enough data to make the right types of decisions and the usefulness of that. We ranged from the presentation from UNDDR, which talked about the challenges, risks, and opportunities of having data, to GeoGlows that has the global data picture and demonstrating really fascinating opportunities for using that. And the WMO on how to collect data and make it accessible. I really liked the FAIR acronym that demonstrates what you need to think about when you're looking at data. And then some real life projects from ISRC. Okay, so group one is Angelica and Igor being from WMO. So that's the kind of the global picture of things. And then group two is with ISRC, David and David, plus Raoul from UNDDR looking at decision-making and some of the examples they brought to the table. So I think all you need to do now is choose your group that you want to join.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your time with our experts in the breakout groups. We had time to actually touch across the three questions, part of the breakout groups while answering the questions. So I will give the floor to the first group. Let's take a numeral order. And I will ask Isabella, my colleague, to report on your exchanges and discussions. Thank you.
Hi, Noemi. Thank you. Yes. Well, we had a more of a Q&A session, and what happened was that the speakers received questions, and then we covered the questions, the opportunities to use the tools, and the contexts in which have been implemented. So we talked a little bit about the technology in GeoGlows and overlaps also with the HydroHub. And so here are some examples about how the technology, for example, the satellite is being used in Guatemala and Atitlan and in Santa Catarina in Brazil. Then they also gave us more examples on, for example, how it is being implemented in countries in Africa, and that here in Israel. We ran out of time for some of the questions, so we do ask if we didn't cover a question or you didn't get to answer it, if you put it in the chat, we can eventually put it here and share it with the speakers so that they can answer it. But yeah, one of the things that they did highlight is that while they are working on information on certain areas of the world, areas like Central Asia, there is not information yet, but they are working on it, and they will publish as soon as technology has been implemented and data has been gathered. So I think, yes, that is a little bit of what we covered.
Thank you very much, Isabella. And then I'll pass over to Roger, who took note for our breaking groups. Thank you, Roger. Over to you.
Thank you. I hope you hear me well. I think we had a bit different dynamic in our group, and probably also a bit a slower note taker myself. But we covered basically three aspects based on the presentation of David and David. One question turned around attracting private sector into these PPPs and investing into resilience infrastructure. How to do that? Answer was, yeah, message to the private sector has to be to think long term, to think about redundancy, to think about multi-purpose infrastructure, and focusing on resilience aspects, and obviously not only profit alone. David also highlighted that governments are deeply in debt, so obviously they cannot do it all alone, and so this is part of the message for attracting private sector into resilience infrastructure. The second round of discussion was about the UK example that was shown in the presentation. It's about, yeah, basically a nature-based solution. What is there the ratio of return, and what is there the outcome? There was a quick discussion on, yes, how important nature-based solutions or how much they are taking up speed currently, also because they have this element of reducing carbon footprint in addition to obviously solving the problems you are tackling. And Netherlands is considered that as one of the leaders on the topic in the case of managing floods and also drought aspects. Finally, the third point we discussed, the question was raised from our colleague from Latin America. What are success stories that could be used in that area, in Latin America? The speakers pointed to the Colombia case on alternative sources of water in drought areas, and also on the management of the Colorado River between US and Mexico, on joint management solutions, also tackling the issues of salinization, and also hopefully having an element of transboundary cooperation and water for peace in that specific context. So these were the three topics briefly discussed in the second group. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. Now I'll pass over to Isabella to bring us the result of the second poll we took, and then the continuation of this e-learning journey with Samira.
Okay, so I'm just gonna project the results. So we had really interesting conversations, and again, as Amanda said, thank you for all of the speakers. We really did learn a lot from all of them. So this is more of a personal choice. You can see the percentages of who they learned the most from the presentations. I did put the how to contact them, the websites, earlier in the chat. So please feel free to reach out to the organization and share if you have any more questions, as well. If you put questions in the chat, we will try to get back to you after that. And then as for the second poll, would you be interested in attending an in-person follow-up workshop? Sorry. 77% said yes. So I'm going to pass the floor to Samira so she can explain a little bit more about this. Sorry, I realized I did not share the results. There you can see it. Yeah, so we have the presentations and then about the workshop. Thank you, Samira.
Thank you, Isabella. I will share the screen. So you should be able to see again the screen, right?
Yes.
Here we go. So, okay, so this e-workshop today was the third of our series, where we also covered citizen science and digitalization for water quality and digitalization in on-site water services in rural and small town areas. So what is this series about? This is basically a run-up workshop series of online workshops, all feeding then into the physical Aguasan workshop week that is happening in October. So what will we do with what we've seen today? We will compile all the content that we've received from the presentations, from the chat, from all your group discussions, and maybe some people also have joined the other workshops that we had last week and the week before. And we will create some sort of input papers that will then all feed in the workshop days, where we will cover this broad topic of digitalization and data management in the water sector. And we want to try to find how we can actually use data for action and for impact in the water sector. And we will cover these three broader topics that we had these e-workshops on in the last weeks. So citizen science and digitalization, the digitalization in rural and small town water services, and the data for water disaster risk reduction that we heard today. We will dedicate probably a full day to these, and then also have some transversal topics that we will address at some point during the workshop week. Mainly, the workshop week will be face-to-face in Switzerland this year. But there will be selected sessions where participants can join online. So we would really encourage you all to apply to become a participant for this workshop. The applications are open until end of the month, so until the 30th of July. And yeah, here's the QR code. I think we will send the link in the chat also. I will just do it in a minute. And then you will get selected by this workshop steering committee, and you should receive in the second half of August the notification whether you are able to join face-to-face or not, so that you can organize yourselves. Why do we have to select? Because it's only 40 participants space, and because we value this face-to-face exchange and that we can actually learn from, but we would be really happy to receive all your applications, because we also strive for a balanced and yeah, for a diverse group of participants. So don't hesitate to apply. With that said, I think I'm handing over to Amanda, and I will stop sharing my screen because we don't have any more slides left. Go ahead, Amanda.
You are muted.
That's funny. I pressed it and it didn't work. Hello. So I just want to summarize a little bit where we've ended up today. As you heard from Samira, it's the part of our e-learning journey, and we're going to be taking this topic forward in the October workshop. But there were three main points that I took away from these presentations. The first one was that we need to collaborate on data, and it was very clear from the presentations that they all use or work with each other to either use their data or share their data to build up the technologies that they have. And that data obviously is available for us to access. The second point was there's still a big lack of data in places, certain parts of the world, particularly in Africa was mentioned, but I don't think it's the only place. And so we're still working really hard to fill those gaps. So it's all very well having the technology, but actually we need to collect the data as well. And so there's some work to be done on that one. The third point I heard was that access is very important. Not only is it part of a human rights-based approach to make data very accessible, but actually it also needs to be, as WMO Igor was explaining, very easy to find. To make it accessible, you need to be able to actually access it easily, find it, and also apparently it's open data that's available for people to use. So I think it's a work in progress, but today hopefully we've gone some way to making a lot of that data much more accessible for everybody who's been here today. And that information is going to be shared after the webinar. We'll be sending out links to the blog, to the recordings, to the slides. And if you've got any information you want to find out more about it, then just get in touch with one of us. And I think the last thing I wanted to say was that some of the interesting discussions were really around the projects that we can use this data for. As ISRC, we're talking about some of the applications and the ability to use nature in some of the solutions helps to reduce the cost. But actually, without understanding what it is you're dealing with in terms of what you're mapping and the potential for floods, where it's going to be, who it's going to affect, it's very difficult to do that planning in the first place. So that digitalization and the data is a key part of that. The investment that needs to go into that needs to be found. And I think that David made a very good case for using insurance money to do that. But it's taking a while for us to get our heads around the fact that you have to spend money to save money to actually protect our resilience to these events. And it's a difficult one. So there needs to be more holistic thinking. But thank you very much for listening today. I think we had a really fabulous group of presenters. Even if not everybody learned as much from each one as the other, I actually found them all extremely helpful, and they fitted into the the bigger jigsaw puzzle of how the data fits together and how we get to use it. So thank you to our speakers. Thank you to our audience. We've had more than 50 people in the workshop today, which is great. And I think that's representative of the last 3 weeks as well. So thank you all, and look forward to seeing many of you in October in the Aguasan workshop. Thank you.
Thank you.